All right. Welcome, everyone, to the latest and greatest episode of Tavern Voices. I'm your host, Kevin King, and with me, as always, is the new leader of the civil unrest, Tyler Raleigh himself, gone from communist to anarchist in 1 week. This is how it goes.
It is. Well, I mean, if we can see a 1 quarter of GDP drop by 4%, next quarter is going to drop 20%. If that can move that fast, then my political affiliations can also move that fast. So I'm just trying to keep up with the Joneses. That's all I'm doing.
Like Pistol Pete out there.
Doing my best, man. My gosh. Could any more be happening in North Carolina and everywhere else?
I know, and I feel like there's so much to talk about, but I just got the urge to talk about The Last Dance. Have you been watching it?
The what?
The Last Dance. Yeah, I guess you haven't.
What is that?
ESPN and Netflix came together.
Oh, the Michael Jordan thing. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's not just the Michael Jordan thing.
Okay,
but it's amazing. I'm being very serious. I saw a bunch of people posting about it. It's a 10-episode miniseries, I guess. But I just happened to be bored because it came out Sunday before last, and I watched the first 2 episodes the Monday after. So I waited. I saw people posting about it. I was bored. I said, I'll put this on. I mean, you're glued to it the whole hour each episode. And now I've watched the first 3 out of 4 are out. And man, it's good. You got to watch it.
They do one every week. They do one every week.
Two every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what is it? Is it the Michael Jordan thing or?
So what it's based on is the very last season of the Bulls altogether, Jordan, the 97-98 season. They called it The Last Dance.
Okay.
So, but it's the career of Jordan and all of the major players in the Bulls and the management and Jackson and everyone, but through the lens of that season. So it's a lot of like flashbacks. So there's kind of one episode where they talk heavily more about Pippen and kind of where he came from, but it's kind of hard to explain, but it's so well done and so uniquely done that it's fantastic. And I mean, but it's also, I think what's great about it is they really just kind of enough time has gone by where everybody's very candid about it. You just get the unfiltered version of what happened.
Well, I mean, if you remember those 30-30 series were just,
they are very good.
Were amazing. And who was the guy that Bill Simmons? That was the guy. He did the 30-30s, and he's not there anymore. But I mean, those 30-30s were great. I mean, I've never saw one that I didn't like, and they were really well done. And once you kind of figure out what works, ESPN probably was able to. I don't know who's doing these, but ESPN, to its credit, did do a great job with those. And so if they can just follow kind of the blueprint for those, even though Bill Simmons isn't there anymore. So I'll check it out. Why don't I just wait till it all comes out and then just binge it? I got time.
Come on. You're enough old school millennial. You could watch an episode every week.
I can't. It's so hard to do that. It's so hard. Like I have HBO now and these shows are coming out like Bad Education. Have you seen that? That looks pretty good. Have you seen that?
No.
So it's a Hugh Jackman. And he basically, it's about the scandal in New Jersey where they were pumping the numbers up to make the school look better, to get like money and accolades and everything else. And it turns out that they, weren't doing that. I'm hoping it's going to be like a great argument for why we need school choice. I'm hoping that's like the end analysis. But like it came out last weekend, and I'm like, do I want to watch it, or do I just want to wait for them all to accumulate and then just watch them all? Because I don't know. I don't know if I can go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
Because our memories are fried. We can only watch like a show, and like by the next week, you're like, I don't even know what happened on the last episode. So,
and it was social then, and now you're being antisocial if you don't binge it.
Oh my god! If you bring it up, if people want to like stab you, like I haven't seen it yet. Don't bring it up. I'm like, it came out 3 years ago. Like the window of social acceptability has passed. I will now tell you what happened in The Sopranos. It's like, I don't know. I have no idea.
But what he will tell you what happened is North Carolina news.
Where do we start? Which one do we start? We're going to start the protesters?
Yeah. I mean, so yesterday the protest happened again, and 4 people were arrested.
Number 3.
Third protest, 4th arrest.
I like it. Keeping it going.
And yeah, so I mean, What do you think about it? I know that it's a touchy subject. I'm on both sides. I mean, I really do feel like we've gotten to a point, and I just tweeted this a few minutes ago. I'd seen something, and our response to it is I'm afraid we've kind of gotten to this point where now we're just into enforcing authority. It's not really about safety anymore. Like, it's kind of like, no, we told you you're not allowed to stand on the sidewalk, and we've got to draw that line, because if everybody stands on the sidewalk, then we've got unrest, so we've got to arrest you. What do you
It reminds me of that what movie, what scene is that, where Breakfast Club. Remember, he's like, why does he get up? He'll get up, I'll get up, it'll be anarchy. And it was like, first he stands on the sidewalk, then the other girl stands on the sidewalk, and pretty soon it'll be anarchy here. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, the problem I have, so I think the first protest was great. The second one, I think, was also good. The problem that they're going to reach, and this is the same thing that happens to all protests, it happened to the Tea Party, happened to Occupy Wall Street, Moral Mondays, is that it's sort of like that Eric Hoffer quote, right? Where everything begins as a movement, turns into a business, and then denigrates into a racket. I think that happens quicker with rallies, where the initial idea is always a great one. It's always sort of a righteous thing. You look at the Tea Party; they were fighting against, the bailouts and the corrupt government, the swamp before we had the term for it. And then you had Occupy Wall Street, people mad about the bailouts again, people mad that the average person was getting screwed in the process. Yeah, and then you can even look at Black Lives Matter, right? I mean, their message was they're worried about a police state, police being able to do whatever they want and getting away with it. And they're always very righteous and I think great causes. And the problem that with these sort of continued protests is people can't go to protests all the time. And so what happens is that the people, like the average everyday person, stops going. And the people that keep going are like the professional agitators. And I don't mean that they're getting paid. I mean that they want to go and get into confrontations. They're angry. They're looking to start fights. They're looking to get in people's faces. And then that's when bad things start to happen. And it's why you see these movements eventually kind of fade away. But protest, I think it happens even quicker, because I think it's sort of like you have a protest, show, hey, this is how we feel. But as soon as you do it every week, it's going to start getting worse. And that's what we saw this last week where, yesterday, the reason that people got arrested, we're now finding out, is because they did damage to the governor's fence. And they were way more confrontational. Everyone's yelling at each other. You got a bunch of weirdos there. And it just did not seem like the initial crowd, which was like regular people protesting. It's now turned into just like angry people that want to show up and get into fights. And that's always going to be bad for the movement.
Yeah, I mean, they instead of calling it a fence, they should have called it a monument, and then it would have been okay. They could have ripped it down. But no, you're right. You get to a point where, is it the message that you're trying to get across, or is it just the protesting to protesting? It's like the South Park rabble, 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 where they just go around saying rabble, 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 and then that's the point.
That's what most of them. It's mostly just they're looking for something to. It's like, I'm angry. It's like, have you ever seen that great meme where the guy's like, I'm angry, and then the guy hands him something and he goes, here's a solution. He goes, I don't want a solution. I want to be mad. And it's like, that's really, people are just mad and they want to just vent. And so what better place to go than a place where you can yell at Cooper and yell at the General Assembly and yell at everyone else. But there's nothing really to it. It's just, I just want to get mad and be mad at somebody.
But at the same time, I've got to say, people are legitimately feeling oppressed. I mean, luckily you and I are in industries that, even though they are hit by this, I don't think there's anybody that's thriving right now, but we were not literally told we can't turn the key on our truck and go make $1, right? I mean, there are people who livelihoods have absolutely been decimated, and there is a response, but it's a slow response. I mean, what is it? 50-60% of people live paycheck to paycheck with zero savings. And you're talking about waiting 3-4 weeks for any sort of unemployment stimulus check to keep them going. I mean, people have been pushed into a corner, and I think you're seeing that to an extent. Now, I'm not saying that everyone there is in that boat, obviously, but and I think part of it too, and I saw Pete Callender tweet about this a little bit ago. He was talking about there's never been a plan or a clear instruction or a clear transparency on data as to what we're going to do. It was flatten the curve, and it just became a motto. It was like hope and change. And then, okay, well, what does that mean? And what if we don't have a steep curve? What if we, North Carolina has, and a lot of states have not even seen, anything that would sort of start to put that stress on the hospitals. It's been the opposite. They're laying people off. You've got people dying of preventable you had these side effects because we got so involved in the motto of flatten the curve. So I think people need a plan. They need hope. If you come to people, people are pretty rational on an individual level and say, here's what's going on. Here's what we're trying to prolong. If we can keep it in this, say 50 to 60% range, give them some numbers. Say, hey, if it spikes up, we need to just cut back. I think you can manage that. But the flipping of the switch is always going to get a tough reaction from people.
No, I agree with that 100%. But I don't think any of those protesters care. I mean, I agree with what you're saying about the majority of people. That's why most people are worried. But the reason I've always been sort of against this reopen NC movement is because it's a political movement. It's like the Moral Monday protesters. It's Democrats protesting Republicans. In this case, it's Republicans protesting a Democrat governor. And you can see that they're walking around with Donald Trump hats and Dan Forest shirts. And I mean, it's like they were always mad at Cooper. And now that it seems like they're like, oh, I have a pass, because now everyone's sort of mad about this. And I agree that, I think that's why people are getting upset, but I don't think that's why the protesters are upset. I mean, I don't feel like those protesters are representative of the majority of people. I feel like it's just angry people who are looking to vent. And to be honest with you, I mean, I brought this up on Facebook and people got really mad at me about this, but I was like, I mean, they very quickly turned into Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, like I said, started with this righteous cause about, hey, we're worried about what the police are doing. And then all of a sudden it was them like blocking streets and yelling at cops and, saying all these horrible names to police officers and destruction of public property. And it's like, that's what they did. I mean, not everyone, but that's the same thing with Black Lives Matter. Not all the Black Lives Matter protesters were doing that, but the founder of the group's husband in a bullhorn was calling the cops piggies. I mean, like, that is a horrible look.
Pretty bad. Yeah.
And then you had other people yelling at the healthcare workers. And it's just sort of like, I do not think that the Reopen NC movement has a lot to do or represents a lot of what people are feeling out there. I think exactly what you said is what people are feeling. But if you look at the polling data, the majority of people are still on board with the governor. It's not like the Tea Party when the polling was just, man, everyone hates what's happening in Washington. It's like you have 10% of people who are really angry at the governor, but the polling does not back that up. And so I think that, yes, the governor is doing a horrible job, but he still is somewhat well liked. I think this could end up hurting him if this keeps going on. But as of right now, he does seem to be striking the right chord with people. But yeah, I do think he needs a plan. I think he does. But I don't think even if he came out with a plan that was well stated and everything else, that the protesters, they would still be mad at him because they're Republicans. And I get it, but I don't think they're representative of what most people are feeling going and what they're going through in North Carolina. You want to talk about Gaston County? This is an amazing story.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, because it all kind of ties in, I think, with what's happening with, obviously this movement. And so, I mean, do you want to fill everyone in?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically the Board of Commissioners, the county commissioners, Gaston County today said, no, we're opening up. We are letting our stay at home expire, and we're going to start opening up in defiance of Governor Cooper, pound sand.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Which is interesting. We talk about this a lot on the show, this sort of, back and forth between county and city rights in North Carolina. Obviously, being Dillon law, we don't really have local rights. So you hear about the sanctuary cities, and when they're immigration sanctuaries, certain people get upset. Other people love it. When they're Second Amendment sanctuaries, the opposite happens. And now you're having basically a work sanctuary, which I don't know how that's going to work. If people from other counties are going to be able to come in and work, and then they're going to see a huge boom in local taxes or something. I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's a little mini federalism.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. And to be honest with you, if I'm the governor, kind of like if I'm Trump, and this is the one thing I always thought was kind of weird about Trump is if I was Trump, I'm like, hey, the state should do it on their own. And then if it goes well, hey, that's why I gave it to them. And if it goes bad, then it's like, see, I told you. And he kind of does that, but he always kind of does the Trump thing where he seems to try and take both sides. He can't stay like committed to the thing. Cooper can though. So if I'm Cooper's advisors, hey, tell the counties to do this on their own. But while you're doing that, advise them to be far more stricter than you know they're going to be. So that way, if it does go south, you can go, hey, I told you. And if it goes fine, then everyone forgets. It's kind of like I've always said, if I was a weatherman, I would always tell people it was going to rain, because if it's sunny out, they'll forget that. They'll be so happy that it didn't rain that they don't care that you got it wrong. And if it rains, you're like, see, told you. And I think Governor Cooper should do that. It totally benefits him. But there's also a benefit of that because, like everywhere else, North Carolina is a good sort of representation of the rest of the country, and that our geographical locations are so very different. I mean, you do have more urban areas, and you also have more rural areas, and you have a lot of in between. And so what makes sense in New Hanover County might not make sense in Mecklenburg County. What makes sense in Mecklenburg County may not make sense in Brunswick County. And so it's sort of, it makes sense politically, and it makes sense to for each county to make their own decisions. But at the same time, I do think that people need to remember, because I'm glad you brought up the sanctuary city thing. That drives me crazy. And this is the same issue. It's like HB2. We all remember HB2. The reason HB2 was allowed is because you're right. The counties, cities do not have autonomy. Their power is derives from the state. And the state can say you can or cannot do this. And so, yeah, if Cooper says, sorry, Gaston County, you can't, they're not supposed to. Now, what does Governor Cooper do? I don't know. I mean, it's sort of like they're calling Cooper's bluff, because what's he going to do? Send in, police, the National Guard? I mean, that would be horrendous for his reelection chances. So I think he just kind of quickly pivots and says, yeah, counties, make up your own mind.
Well, I think the interesting part too, that would be something to dive into, is that, and I may be stretching a little bit here, but I almost feel like, North Carolina isn't also like a strictly 3-branch kind of stool. It's a very, very heavily legislature driven state.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like it would be up to the General Assembly to come in, and I don't know if an executive order would override I don't know.
No, well, the state statute, the emergency orders and quarantine powers currently right now exist with the governor, the executive branch, with regards to declaring an emergency. Now, some of the stuff that he's done with the quarantine power, they've argued he needs concurrence of the Council of State, and he argues he has it. There's a debate whether or not he does, but there's actually a bill that's been filed by a Republican a state rep who is going to put a constitutional amendment that would change that would require the agreement of the Council of State, and would call the General Assembly back within 15 days if he were to do something like this again. But as of right now, he's got pretty strong constitutional authority statewide to do what he's doing. And if the county does it, they're really not supposed to, once again, as the law stands right now.
Well, it's a good thing, North Carolina is at least consistent in our history of rebellion and defiance of authority. A lot of people don't, realize that we're kind of the epicenter of, shots fired, whether it be the American Revolution, the Civil War, coronavirus 2020.
Well, let's also not forget the only coup d'etat in American history happened in Wilmington. So. Yeah.
It was those racist Wait, no, they weren't Republicans.
No, it's Democrats.
Oh, it's funny how that works. So on this same subject, I wanted to get your opinion, and I don't know if you've seen this yet or not. But earlier today, a tattoo artist here in Raleigh opened his tattoo shop and said, I'm going to open and go to business. And he was arrested and escorted out of his own business today by local authorities. What are your thoughts on that? Because now you're starting to get into, this isn't a public land protest. I'm on the sidewalk damaging property. Like, you're going inside of a business, handcuffing someone and taking them to jail for opening their doors. Because if he's doing it, you've got a mask, because now you're not talking about, is he acting in the safety of his patrons? It is, He's just in defiance of what the governor said. And so that's an authority thing versus a safety thing.
Well, I mean, so he just opened up. No one was coming in, or he just opened up his doors and they told him to close them.
That's I don't know. Happened. I mean, he didn't force anyone to come in. I don't know.
Well, I know, but I'm saying is that, I mean, if it's sort of like if I were to go into work, that would be different than if I were to go into work and then start doing a giveaway on the air and inviting people over to the station. And, you know, then
I'm sure he was open for business.
Well, because I mean, this is a fascinating issue, one way above my pay grade. One that, once again, we've talked about this before. David French has written about, you know, with the police powers, you know, belonging to the state, that they're pretty broad. I mean, the one debate I think that exists is not whether or not the government can shut a business down. It obviously can, right? I mean, for a lot of reasons. I mean, let's face it. If you're not meeting occupancy levels, they can shut you down. If the fire code's not being up to standard, or, you know, whatever code they have. I mean, think about how many regulations you have to follow. So we know they can shut a business down. Now, on something like this, the question is that if they make you, you know, shut down and there's no chance of opening, one of the questions I've heard debated is, do they have to then provide compensation because they're shutting you down? And that's an interesting, I think, debate. But I think within a certain time period, like within 30 days, I don't know, but I do believe that, yeah, the government has that power. I mean, it sounds insane, but like I said, I mean, if they can shut you down because you have one too many people in your bar because you're over your occupancy levels, I mean, the government has the power to shut you down, and they sort of set the rules. And if we want to change that, I guess we can. But yeah, I mean, especially on a quarantine issue, as of right now, I'm pretty sure the governor has that power. Will that change? I mean, will we sort of look at it? Because the one question I keep hearing is the quarantine power usually deals with sick people, and we're quarantining healthy people. And so I don't know.
Right. And that's what I was pointing out is we're at a point now where we're not talking about safety. We're not talking about someone doing something to intentionally spread the virus or to hold an unsafe environment where the virus could spread rampantly. Like, the guy's wearing a mask on his face as he's being escorted, out. So you're talking about, like, if he can safely do this, and you're seeing that already in other states, right? I mean, I saw specials of barbershops and different things trying to conduct safe business in Georgia, over the weekend. And like you said, we have to figure out what some sort of normal is from this. We're going to have to do that at some point. Is the authority approach winning the hearts and minds, or is it making it worse?
Well, I'll tell you something. I mean, it all depends on who you are and how susceptible you are, because, it doesn't really matter if you're not trying to spread it, because, I mean, let's face it. If you have a communicable disease and they know about it, and so they're going to force you to stay in your house, and you're like, well, I went to the store, it wasn't a big deal, you can still get in trouble. And that's, I guess, one of the problems that we have with this is figuring out who has it and who doesn't. And so he could have it and possibly give it to a customer. And so that's the reason why the government has done what it's done. So, I mean, I think that the authority is there, but I think the question is that, yeah, I mean, how do we get back to normal? But I mean, I don't know. I mean, is that guy going to get prosecuted? I'm not sure. I mean, a couple of these cases, it would be nice for them to go to court, because this quarantine is going to last for a little while, and it'd be a good opportunity to get some new cases and some new case law with regards to quarantines, because I don't think we've had anything in like 40 years or 50 years. So it might not be a bad idea for some people to take this to court just to see if they can get something new on the books. Yeah.
Because, I mean, now you're talking about, okay, a communicable disease. I mean, so let's say that it's twice as spreadable as the flu, and let's even be super concerned and say 10 times as deadly as the flu. Like, let's go that route. Probably not looking that way, but let's go that route. Okay, well, what's the threshold? Do we just say, okay, if there's a flare-up of a disease that's X worse? Because we don't do this. I mean, if someone's got the flu and they went in the tattoo parlor shop and gave it to 10 other people, we don't shut things down for that.
Well, but he's being arrested for violating the executive order.
Right. He's for violating the authority, not the safety, which is what I was getting at.
Well, but what's the difference? I mean, to me, it's the same. I mean, it's the same thing, because it is a safety issue, because they're arguing is that he might have it. Do we know definitively he doesn't have it?
But what is going to be the threshold for determining when a disease can be authoritatively?
Well, that's the power that lies with the government. I mean, they're the ones that get to make that. I mean, so if they want to do this every flu season, they could, but they'd probably get voted out of office pretty quickly. But
right,
yeah,
and that's what I'm saying. You've got to start to put some. I understand it's very easy to look at it and say, okay, someone might get sick. Someone that you're starting to look at that one-off thing. Let's do X, Y, and Z because something else may happen. But at a certain point, I mean, it's got to be reasonable. Because I was seeing something recently, maybe it was on the news or an article or something. And they were like, with everything that's going on in the world and how things spread so quickly more than ever, like this isn't going to be a once in a 50-year situation. We've already had SARS and MERS and a lot of other things just in the last 15, 20 years. I don't think that's going to slow down. I think it's going to
but that didn't get here. Those didn't get here. I mean, I actually think
we had cases in the United States.
Yeah, but I'm saying it wasn't like what we're seeing now. I mean, we handled it the way you're supposed to handle it. And I actually think we've done a better job. I mean, if you look at human history, we have actually over the last 50 years done a pretty good job, not only globally but in the United States, of keeping this from happening. I mean, this was a problem because China basically lied. And I mean, we could have stopped this had China been honest. I mean, we would have seen a way different reaction to this. But that was a big issue. But so
when do we invade?
Yeah, that would.
I mean, you're talking about economically. I mean,
well, I would say it would fit the pattern if Trump wanted to do that, right? We had Bush who was like, we're not going to be interventionist, and then starts the war in Iraq, and then Obama was like, oh, we're going to get out of Iraq, and then not only like puts us more in Iraq, more in Afghanistan, starts a war in Yemen, I mean, in Syria and everything else. And so, yeah, it would fit the pattern of Trump to, we're going to get out of the Middle East and then we go to war with China. That might be a little more significant, though. But no, I mean, I think we should go after China. I don't know how, but I think, yeah, I have no problem. I mean, everyone thinks that I like China or something along those lines, only because I'm against like the trade war. But I think from a national security and now this perspective, absolutely. I just don't think the argument is that we should bring all the manufacturing back here. I think we should work with like Vietnam and India and some other countries and basically kick China out of the mix and say, okay, this is your punishment for what you have done. But I think we're doing better.
Then do you end up with a Germany situation and then it becomes worse? Then they really have no incentive to let us know the next time some bizarre disease comes from Wuhan.
Yeah, but China is. I've never been one of those people who is convinced that China is on the cusp of greatness. There are so many reasons why that country is overhyped. One, the aging population. I mean, their population, that one child policy has decimated the population, and that it's all older now. The young people, they do not have as many young people. So they're going to have a huge problem with that coming in the future. And they have insane amounts of debt. Insane. What's that?
Yeah, I said problem.
I mean, paying for all that, I guess they can one of the benefits of being an authoritarian regime is you can just kill all the old people, I guess, and just be like, don't get old. But they have a crazy amount of debt.
Doing with this, they're like, let's just release this out.
Well, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that, but that was maybe one of the reasons why. But
I my tinfoil hat. We can do it.
I just think that China's not as big of a threat as everyone makes them out to be. I think you don't know. It's like North Korea. They're such liars that you don't know what's going on in that country. And I think it's far worse than they want us to believe that it is. They have a lot of problems coming in the next couple of years or decades that for them to have supremacy, I don't know. I'm just finding it hard to buy it. Just me, but
yeah. Well, it's interesting. No, it's funny you talk about that because lately I've seen so many people posting about how this is a failure of the Donald Trump administration. They want to blame him for everything going on. And it's funny because as critical as I am of him most of the time philosophically, I look back, I don't see that he did a lot. I mean, I remember when he was banning flights from China and everyone was attacking him over that. And it was interesting because my mom sent me an article. It was a screenshot of an article from the USA Today. And she said, can you confirm this article is real? So I went back to the USA Today site and went back through and found it by the author. And 100% of the article came out in late January. And I actually posted on Facebook. You may have seen it. But it was from late January. And it was talking about how, we had a positive case in the United States recently. This is no big deal. It did X, Y, and Z in China. I mean, it was this whole New York or USA Today piece just completely blowing off the idea that this was going to be any sort of situation. And it was actually kind of promoting Dr. Fauci and this idea that we could spin up vaccines super quick. And that was kind of the premise of the article, is that we could respond so much faster than it took us with swine flu or SARS or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. I've always wondered why, but I don't get what's the argument. Is that no one was taking it seriously? Is that the purpose?
I don't think that's that was just the art. Yeah, no one was paying any attention.
Well, okay, because I've always wondered why people were because some people I thought were posting it to be like, this was a conspiracy because they're talking about the coronavirus, and I was like, it was already spreading. Because I remember late January was when I went to that wedding in the Bahamas, and I remember we were all kind of joking about it, that China was facing some huge problems, and this could be like our last trip. And like, wow, it doesn't seem as funny now because we didn't think it was actually going to happen. We just kept thinking like, oh, this is just going to happen in China. I mean, the argument that you would make is that, yes, but a columnist at the USA Today is not getting classified debriefings like the president is. And so the question is that did his team fail him? Because that could be the case, because somebody should have known. I'm not blaming Trump, but someone in his administration or people in his administration failed. They should have known something, and either they didn't tell him or they did, and Trump said, I don't believe it. And if that's the case, then Trump's at fault. But if someone didn't tell him, then that's not Trump's fault. But somebody dropped the ball in the Trump administration. I don't know who it is, but there's no doubt that somebody should have been looking into this and being like, oh my God, this thing is worse than we thought. I mean, you had people I think
it was a catch-up game. I mean, to be honest, I think it was by the time we realized that China was full of it.
But I'm saying that's what we pay intelligence communities, because we know that countries lie to us. So we know people are looking into North Korea. And so somebody should have alerted somebody. And that's why people
9/11 bureaucracy failure situation.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like, that's why people were making a big deal that you had, what was his name? Peter Navarro, who had that memo about how damaging this could be. Like, I think that was like early February. And so why did he know? Did he read something? I mean, like, he's an economist. Like, how did he know about how bad this virus was going to be? Like I said, did someone tell him? And so was there communication? Did he just guess? These are the questions that we're going to have to figure out, but it may have been a bureaucracy failure, or it could have been someone dropping the ball, or it could have been Trump ignoring it. But there clearly is somebody messed up, because I'm not sure how much we would have, better off we would have been. But I mean, we should have been taking this seriously a little earlier, and I don't know whose fault that is.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the fact that we rely on these bureaucracies. How many times again do we have to? It's funny. I don't know if you've watched it yet, but the Waco miniseries is on Netflix now. It's fantastic, and you look at these bureaucratic failures, and I think that's the scary part, is you get into a situation where, because right now you've got a lot of people beating up on Trump, and maybe it's his fault. That's fine, but you get to a point where you say, why is it up to a reality TV host to save our lives? Why is it up to Roy Cooper I think we've just gotten to a situation where we just say, oh, well, there's an agency for that, and we don't pay attention to them or what they're doing, or if there's efficiencies. And
how are we supposed to know? Like, how are you and I supposed to know what's going on in China? I mean, that's the job of the CIA or the FBI or whoever, in the administration.
I mean,
what I'm saying is that let's say we get rid of those institutions. Like, you and me are never going to know this. I mean, we're not going to do private sector intel. I mean, who's going to pay?
Sure, there would. I mean, companies are already doing that now. I mean,
but they don't disseminate it to everyone.
The idea
within their company.
And this is what drives me crazy about large government arguments, is that it's a but for. but for government, what would we do? It's who would make the roads, because if government wasn't there making the roads, I mean, you think some company is going to make the roads? And then if it were,
you're going full libertarian on me, huh?
If it weren't for local health departments, how would we know where it's safe to eat without them going around and, it's saying if it weren't for those things, that something else wouldn't take its place and be far more efficient. I mean, the idea that I mean, you've seen the WHO is a bloated version of a bureaucracy, and
but that's
in this situation. There's always going to be special interest in people in positions of power that should have never been there, and it's whether Obama appointed them or Trump appointed them or whoever. You rarely get that market competition ever inside of a government, because you don't get the best of the best.
Listen, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to deny that government is too big. I think we could cut government by 30% and be much better off. But you're not privatizing intelligence. Like, it's just not happening. I mean, it's not. I mean, that there are roles for government. There are things that government will do. And like, for example, police, fire. I mean, yes, we can privatize that, but for the whole purposes is that these are the things that we give up freedoms for in order for government to provide. And intelligence is one of the reasons why you have a country, because even if you have private intelligence, as you pointed out, a company does that. Companies do it all the time, but they don't tell anybody. And in fact, I mean, that's one of the big problems. And so that's what you do is you rely on the executive branch, or in this case, the executive branch, to have competent people working to gather intel and then be able to tell the president what he should be doing to keep us safe. On any other issue, I'd agree with you. But on national security, that is 1000% the government's job. And that is why we have a government. National security is like job number one of the United States government. And so that is why we are supposed to follow them. And when it's not upheld, actually, you mentioned Waco on Hulu. They have a series called The Looming Tower based on the book that explains basically how 9/11 happened. And once again, it's bureaucracy. It's FBI and the CIA not communicating properly and getting the information that led to 9/11. But you watch that and you're like, they were gathering the information and it was like internal conflicts. That's always going to exist. But the reality is that is what their job is supposed to be. I mean, you're just not going to be able to privatize intelligence gathering. I mean, why have a government then? I mean, that's the whole purpose of government.
Exactly. Get rid of it all. No, so
dude, you're an anarchist now, man. That's crazy.
No, I think limited government is supposed to be a referee on the court, not playing the game, right?
Not with national security. National security, it is their game. It is their game.
Listen, I understand military espionage and that sort of thing, but what I'm saying right now is when this is all said and done, who do you think is going to have the most information on the next SARS virus? Is it going to be the CDC and the WHO, or is it going to be Google, the Gates Foundation, Apple? I mean, they're already talking about how they can track data and do all this stuff. I'm not a proponent of that, but I'm saying they're well more equipped to be able to say, okay, we know that this illness is here. We can track these people. They went there. They did all of this stuff. And there's reasons we don't want the government to have that power of tracking the movement of every single individual.
Well, I don't want anyone to have that power. And no one has that power. I mean, cell phone companies have that power over their consumers that we voluntarily get into an agreement with. But I don't want anyone having that power. I mean, that's why that's why the government is supposed to be in charge, because they have to go through courts and get warrants, and you have someone defending us and everything else. Companies aren't going to do that. And, it's funny thing about Gates, because there's all these conspiracy theories about Bill Gates, causing all of this. And it's kind of funny because you have a lot of conservatives who are like, Donald Trump will save us from Bill Gates. And it's like so funny because it's like conservatives are like, big government will save us from big tech. And it's like, I just never thought we would hear, these activists yelling about how big government's going to save us from the big bad private sector. It's kind of like Twilight Zone-ish in a little bit of a way. But I mean, listen, that's the reason government exists. This is what they're supposed to do, in my opinion. I mean, and I would argue that instead of wasting time on all the stupid stuff that we waste things on, that we waste time on, that, Trump gets bogged down, and all presidents do. But, you think about like tariffs and like the stupid trade war and, subsidies for farming, like all these things that we're wasting time on. That is not what government's supposed to be doing. I agree with you on that. I mean, they should be completely out of the private sector. Let them do their thing. Slight regulation. Obviously, we want clean water and clean air and everything. And we also want to make sure, the big tech's not spying on us and all of that. Basic regulations. But no, the government should not be dictating economic policy. It's far beyond that. And all the resources we're wasting on that could be used to gather intelligence and get this information. I mean, I would argue what we should be doing is taking all these resources that we're wasting on stupid stuff that they have no business being involved in, and push it to the stuff they're supposed to be working on. Securing the border, dealing with, immigration. That's one of their jobs. Dealing with what's happening in foreign countries. That's their job. That's it. That's all we need them doing. All the stuff they're doing domestically, that's not their goal. Their job is not to dictate what's happening in the economy.
The problem is that, a camel is the result of a legislative committee on horses, right? I mean, when you get people together, everyone's got to get their special interest in. You and I can sit here and agree. We think government should do this 20% of stuff, cut out all the bloat, stop spending all the money, stop taking on the debt, all this stuff. And then when we get a third person on here, it's like, well, here's my 2% of what government should do. Yeah. And then it gets to where we're at now, and then nothing gets done.
Well, but if only we had like a document that, enumerated the powers for what government can and cannot do. And there we go. I mean,
crap, Thomas Jefferson finally found it back.
So, I mean, we could talk about what government should do, and you can interpret it the way you want to interpret it. But there's a reason why, powers were enumerated to different branches of government. And the reality is the states have a lot of power. The federal government's supposed to have less power, but there are things that the federal government does have power over. And one of those, like I said, is national security, 100%, securing our border, 100%. And so to me, this is a national security issue. And so absolutely the government should be on board with this. And once again, I'm not saying that it was all the Trump administration's fault or it's Trump's fault, but somebody messed up. And just like they messed up with 9/11, just like they messed up with Waco, just like they messed up in all these instances, somebody messed up, and we got to figure out who it was and figure out why, and then fix the problem.
And abolish that department, right?
I mean, I know China is a secretive country. I get that. And it's like North Korea, right? It's hard to know what's going on in North Korea. China, less so, mostly because, they're way bigger. And so it's hard for them to keep completely quiet. But the reality is there were countries that knew about this and reacted before we did. I mean, Gavin Newsom of California acted with regard to shutting down the state before a lot of other states did. So, I mean, once again, it depends on where you're getting the information, what's happening here. But it's clearly somebody didn't do their job. And I don't know who that was, but they should be fired, but they won't be. No. They'll get suspended with pay.
So, the last topic I think we've got to touch on is, this new third-party candidate.
Yes, and also announced that I'm joining the campaign now. So, yeah, Justin Amash. Justin Amash. What district is he out of in Michigan? I can't remember now.
I don't know the district.
So he's a congressman out of Michigan, and he is vehemently anti-Trump. Vehemently. Now, here's a side note, is that Justin Amash is a libertarian-leaning Republican who was part of the Tea Party movement. Big, like him, his name usually gets mentioned with like Thomas Massey and, Walter Jones, the late Walter Jones probably also maybe got mentioned as sort of like this, like libertarian, even though Walter Jones wasn't so libertarian, but was more, libertarian maybe later in his life with regards to sort of foreign entanglements and being concerned about the debt. But Amash, big time libertarian leaning, and was huge in the Tea Party. And he was one of the Republicans, not kind of unlike me, who was like, I don't get why everyone likes Trump. He seems very big government. I don't think he's a conservative. I don't like some of the stuff he says. I think he's like harming the movement, And all of a sudden he fell out of favor quick with conservatives. And so he eventually was so disgusted, he left the party, and he's now an independent. And now he has joined the Libertarian Party and has started a exploratory committee to run for president. And Now, the press is going to hype him up crazy. I saw an interesting tweet today where someone said he's at 3%. Initial polls for third-party candidates are always overstating the candidate's popularity. So more than likely, he's doing even worse than that. He's not going to do anything. The only thing he could do, and this is big asterisk, big but, because this was the same argument made about Evan McMullen in Utah, is that clearly there are people that maybe still like him in Michigan. Trump, he would like to win Michigan, but could Justin Amash steal enough Republican voters away? Because Trump did not win Michigan by a lot, if I remember. I mean, I think it was Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. He won by like 70,000 total. So if Amash can pick off 10, 20,000 votes, that could cost Trump Michigan. That's the only place I think that he provides any possible damage. And I still think that's wishful thinking. Amash's candidacy is essentially for people that don't want to vote for Trump and were maybe going to vote for Biden. They probably never were going to vote for Trump, but maybe they were going to vote for Biden. And now they're like, oh, I'll just vote for Justin Amash. But I don't think he has any impact whatsoever on the presidential race.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's you barely touched on this. I don't even know if you meant to a second ago when you first started talking about it, but the media is going to like him. Any Republican that is going to be anti-Trump is going to be a darling to the media. So I would be interested to see what kind of coverage he does get, more so than the usual crazy vermin supreme sort of, oh, it's just some crazy third-party candidate, Gary Johnson, whatever, if that's going to affect things at all. But my question is, do you think it will attract any of the people who are – no, I mean, I guess not. I'm trying to think of some of the factions in the Democrat Party who are not excited at all about Joe Biden. Would it bring in anyone? No.
I heard someone say that it would hurt. First of all, it's not going to hurt Trump. If you're a Trump supporter, you're not voting for Justin Amash, right? You're not. More than likely, the only
Except
voter.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm someone that could. I'm someone who could be like, well, maybe I could vote for Amash. I don't know what I'm going to do. You never know. I could vote for Trump again. I mean, I could vote for Biden. I don't know. I have no idea which way I'm going to go, but Amash is not going to take any Democrat votes at all, because the only people that don't like Biden are the liberal Democrats, the Bernie Sanders, and not one of them is voting for Amash. So they might not vote. They might just vote for Biden. But the only voter that's going to Amash is the Tyler Crawley Republican. I don't even know who that would be. Like the Mitt Romney Republican, like someone who's a Republican, someone who's a conservative, more of establishment, I guess. What did someone call me one time? The Chamber of Commerce Republican. They might vote for Amash, but there's just not a lot of us. I openly admit that we are grossly overrepresented in the media. I will also freely admit that. And so you're right. Amash will also get a lot of attention because he's very articulate. He knows a lot of what he's talking about. And it'll be interesting because Gary Johnson was liberal on issues like foreign entanglements, things like that. But he got a lot of attention too. Remember that famous, there's a great Twitter exchange yesterday. I think it was, did you see that? Yeah, it was Jerry Dunleavy made a joke about Justin Amash. I had one question for you. What is Aleppo? And this all, of course, and then Gary Johnson underneath it tweeted, or something like that, or oh, geez, which is that famous clip on Morning Joe when he was asked by, who's the Morning Joe staple? What's that guy's name? I haven't seen it in a while. Who asked him about Aleppo, and Gary Johnson said, what is Aleppo? And it was like, at the time, the hot spot in the Middle East about what was going on. I think it was Syria. And he was like, yeah, I don't know what Aleppo is. And it was just gone. This dude's running for president and doesn't know about the hot spot right now in the Middle East with what was happening with the Syrian civil war. And so it was over. It was just you could just see his campaign disappear at that point. But Amash is he's a congressman. And that's what he's talking about. He's articulate, but he's very conservative. And if you've noticed, a lot of the anti-Trump Republicans who get a lot of fodder, like the Brett Stevens, the Max Boots, and the others. And Brett Stevens actually isn't that bad, but like Max Boot, what's the crazy Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post? They basically turned liberal. Like, I mean, they're making liberal arguments now. Amash comes at it from the conservative, like Trump is a big government Republican. Trump's violating the Constitution. And I wonder how the media is going to handle that because, it's sort of, as we point out, it's always this sort of, it's okay when my side does it. It's not okay when your side does it. Amash is this sort of, it's not okay when anybody does it. And so for him to sort of make some of these claims against Trump, I don't know. I think he might get some attention at first, but I wonder if he'll have any staying power because he is so conservative, because the media does not like constitutional conservatives. They like the fake Republicans, the more big government Republicans. I don't know. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Joe Scarborough actually used to make conservative arguments against Trump. But the one thing that drives me nuts about Scarborough is like how much he helped Trump. Like, I mean, dude, he was on a show all the time and now acts like, I can't believe Trump. It's like, dude, you helped get him elected. And so all these journalists who helped Trump get elected, it drives me nuts as to how disgusted they are by him. It's like, that's your fault. And it just, I'll give Sebastian Gorka credit because he even admitted that on his radio show the other day. I was listening and he said, that's why the media is so disgusted, because they helped create him. And I was like, yes, exactly. I'm like, it's true. The media helped create Donald Trump, and now they're mad that and I think that's a lot of it's sort of self-resentment, but I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see if the media covers Amash when he goes full on. He's also pro-life. Gary Johnson was pro-choice. And so he's a very interesting libertarian because most libertarians are pro-choice. He's pro-life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think the question ultimately is, does he spoil the election or not? It's not going to be we had our first third party president ever. It's going to be, how many votes did he steal and from where? Did he help Trump? Did he hurt Trump? Yeah. So,
well, like I said, I think the only place he's really got a shot is Michigan, because I think he could, because third party candidates can do well in their home state. We've seen examples of this, but I don't think he's going to win Michigan. But remember, Trump, people forget how razor thin Trump's margin was in those three Rust Belt states. And so if Amash can pull a couple votes, it could be a game changer. Oh, real quick before we go, did you see that poll that came out that showed Trump polling like 30, like it was low 30, or it was high 30s or low 40% with Hispanics in North Carolina, but his 65 and older voters had dropped off more than he had picked up because they're worried about this, calling for the government to open. Old people are worried for obvious reasons about this virus. But Hispanics, and I think maybe the Hispanics were liking his argument about, hey, let's reopen and get back to work. And so I know we're about to run out of time, but I thought that was kind of interesting that we saw this sort of shift where Trump picked up Hispanic voters, which surprised a lot of people, but at the same time lost older voters, which are like a staple of the Republican Party. So who knows what's going to happen in 2020 with this virus.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you think of the over 65 as but I mean, so what do people think? And this is way too much of a final thought, but like, what do people think the plan is? I mean, we have to reopen.
We do.
I mean, we're not talking about a matter of weeks. Like, if we just hang out 2 or 3 weeks longer, we're going to have a treatment and a vaccine. We're talking months, if not years. So my question is, what do they think the alternative is?
Well, I think what it's the same thing. It's the plan argument. I think here's the biggest problem. This is something that's going to bite all of the politicians in the butt. We need data, because if you want people to feel like, hey, it's safe to go out there, because I mean, we didn't get into it today, but we've talked about it in previous shows, these antibody tests and other tests that are being done. It's all based on extrapolations, which, by the way, extrapolations are extremely difficult to do with small sample sizes. And right. There's that video that made the rounds over the weekend, those Bakersfield California doctors, their extrapolations were awful. I watched that video, like the opening of it, and was like, their math is horrendous on this issue. The jumps that they were making and filling in holes, it wasn't good. But there are reports out there, like the New York Times reported on that there might be 20% of antibodies in New York. We know what's happening in Sweden. There's arguments about California. And so we might be at a point where we're getting close to herd immunity, but we don't know. And so if you tell old people, hey, it's safe to go outside, here's how we know it's safe, then they will be okay with it. But right now, it seems like all we're doing is guessing. And we're just like, and so if you're someone who's susceptible to this and you hear the president go, yeah, it's okay to go outside. And you're like, well, why do you think so? And it's like, well, because you're going to be like, well, I'm not going out. But if they're like, here's why we think it's safe. And so we need to start seeing some serious data and actually figuring this out, because right now it's best guess. And I don't believe, and I don't blame people for not believing these studies, because the original models that caused all this in the first place were wrong. So how do we know those are right? I mean, we need data. We need hard data that actually proves something instead of just best guess, which we seem to be kind of running on right now.
Yeah. Or worst guess at some points. All right, Tyler, I appreciate it. That was a good final thought.
You done?
I'm done.
Thank you. That was a good final thought. It was a good final question.
It was. I guess we'll just do it again next week. I mean, by next week, we're going to be pretty close to opening bell. So the May 8th will be fast approaching.
I was like, wait, what? Closing bell's at 4:00. What are you talking about? So
not that the market has closed.
Yeah, it's closed. I was gonna say it's closed. That's why I was a little confused there with the timeline, but we'll see. Hopefully we have more data. Once again, this is all about information. Hopefully
it's all, and what better place to find it than here on Tavern Voices.